This is Orson Welles, speaking from London. A repository of death. Here in the grim stone structure on the Thames which houses Scotland Yard is a warehouse of homicide, where everyday objects, a pin, a garden hose, a handbag, all are touched by murder. Here's a car tire. There were 3 others, all attached to a sedan. They were removed.
Great Scott, Inspector. Those vandals, they've stripped the car of everything.
Even the 4 tires, sir.
There's nothing left.
Except evidence.
Well, today, one of those tires, the one that became a vital clue in the case, can be seen in the Black Museum.
From the annals of the Criminal Investigation Department of the London Police, we bring you the dramatic stories of the crimes recorded by the objects in Scotland Yard's Gallery of Death, the Black Museum.
Well, here we are, in the Black Museum. Scotland Yard's Museum of Murder. As here lies death. On the shelves, around the walls, death in many disguises. Here's a length of electric wiring. The protective insulation has been stripped away. The man touched it. He died. The jury found it was murder. Here's a card. Invitation to a party. The invitation was accepted. Death was the end of that. Here's the tire. It's an ordinary car tire. Once it belonged to a sedan that stood in a garage at South End. On a certain night, some years ago, 2 men entered the garage quietly, after first forcing the lock.
There we are, Ted.
Good work, Harry. Look at her. Brand sparking new.
And she's ours once we get her out of the garage.
Quietly does it. I'll take off the brake. Right. We'll push her out in the street and down the road a bit.
Okay, I'm ready.
The object of this stealthy midnight visit was a new car. The 2 men pushed the automobile down the slope of the road, jumping in when the car began to gather speed.
All right, Harry. Get in.
Oh, nice going. Get us started, Ted.
Right.
Not a sound behind us. We got away with it.
It was easy. By morning, we'll have everything we want off this car.
Tires, spare parts, the seat.
And then we'll ditch what's left, eh? We'll make our fortune this way, Harry, my boy.
Sounds easy money.
It is. Come on, I'll show you what this car can do. Flat out.
A car traveling fast along the road to Eastwood. Its twin lights cutting beams in the darkness of the night. And a policeman cycling homeward.
Hello? What's that up there ahead?
What?
A man in the center of the roadway.
Oh, wait till our lights pick him up clearly.
It's a cop.
Oh? And he's got his hand up, signaling us to stop.
Say, you don't think...
What, the word's got out this car's been pinched? Not a chance.
Then what's this copper doing?
Oh, might want to lift home, you never know.
There's his bike at the side of the road. Ted, I don't like
Take it easy, will you? We'll bluff our way out. If he makes trouble, I can handle him.
Well, go easy on using that gun.
Leave it to me. Good evening, Constable. Anything the matter?
I'll have to ask you not to speed like that along this road, sir.
Were we speeding?
Well, I think you know you were, sir, you know. There's been a number of serious accidents around here lately.
Oh, dear.
Now, may I see your license?
My license?
Yes, sir.
You know, funny thing, I'm afraid I don't have it on me, Constable.
Then I'll have to request some other means of identification, sir.
Well, you know, I haven't anything on me at all.
Well, where are you going, sir, and where have you come from?
Well, we're just driving.
Is the car yours?
No, Constable. The car belongs to me.
Oh, I see, sir. Then, would you tell me its number?
It's on the front of the car if you want to see it.
I know the number, but do you?
Well, no, not offhand.
As I thought, sir. This is a stolen car.
Stolen?
You'd both better get out. Now, come on. I'll have to take down some particulars.
Yeah, what makes you think you can order us around, eh?
Get out, I said. Come on. I want your names. And put that gun away.
Say your prayers, copper.
Give me that gun.
Don't let him take it, Ted. Yeah.
I won't, don't worry. You ask for trouble, copper, you're gonna get it.
A car drives away. A man lies dead on the roadway. A murder has been committed. Murder of a policeman.
Lovely morning, George.
You wouldn't think it to read a morning paper, Tom. Nothing in it but crime.
You won't find much crime round these parts.
Here, what's the matter with your dog?
Oh, he seems to have found something ahead there.
Well, it's not like him to get that excited. What's the matter with him?
Yeah, wait a minute, George.
Huh?
Unless I'm mistaken, it ain't only in the morning papers you'll find crime.
What do you mean?
Well, ahead there.
Yeah?
Over by the side of the road. It looks like a man.
So it does.
Come on. Why, it's Charlie Acker.
He's dead.
By morning, Scotland Yard was represented at the scene of the crime by Inspector Clancy and Detective Sergeant Redding.
He was shot 3 times, Redding.
Nasty business, sir. Oh, here's a notebook lying on the ground beside him.
Yes, and he was holding a pencil in his right hand.
Well, that seems fairly straightforward, sir. He was about to take down some particulars from a person or persons whom he'd met.
The evidence suggests that, Sergeant.
But wait a minute, Inspector. His torch is here in his pocket.
Is it?
And there's no street lighting nearby. How could he have been writing?
By the light of a vehicle, presumably.
Of course, sir.
Either the headlights or the interior lighting of a car or a truck.
More likely the interior lighting, don't you think, Inspector?
Well, we'll work on that assumption first.
Which means it was a car.
Yeah, there are some tracks here. You can see the skid marks. Now, they might be caused by a car starting fairly fast. I want those tracks photographed.
The photographs were duly sent to certain experts at Scotland Yard, and a report came back to Inspector Clancy.
Report from the yard, sir.
Yes, Sergeant Redding?
Those tracks were made by an Evans car.
An Evans, eh? Get a full list of all stolen cars within a 50-mile radius. We'll see if there was an Evans amongst them.
There were 2. One was found. Inspector Clancy interviewed the owner of the other.
Yes, it was taken the night before last, Inspector. Some bounder picked the lock of my garage and got away with the car.
I'll get a full description from you, sir.
Certainly, but I say, Scotland Yard doesn't usually go chasing stolen cars, does it?
Not usually, eh, Colonel Fentress?
Oh, there's something else behind it, is there? Excuse me a moment. Hello, Fentress speaking. Yes. Just a moment. It's for you, Inspector.
Thank you, sir. Hello? Yes, Redding? At Raleigh. I see. Yes, I'll come down right away.
Something happened, Inspector?
An Evans car's been found, sir, abandoned in a ditch outside Raleigh. A new Evans. Index mark TW6120.
But that's mine, by Jove.
Then you'd better come along, sir.
They found the car, the police going over it for fingerprints. Curious crowd gathered around it. It was a vastly different car from the one Colonel Fentress had locked in his garage 2 nights earlier.
Great Scott, Inspector, those vandals, they've stripped the car of everything.
Even the 4 tires, sir.
There's nothing left.
Except evidence.
What do you mean, Inspector?
This was the car concerned in the murder of Constable Hacker on Eastwood Road.
My car? Concerned in that killing?
Come with me, Colonel. I'll show you the evidence to prove it.
That car is the first link in a long chain at the end of which is the murderer. And a further link is the missing 4 tires, one of which became the vital clue in the case. That tire can be seen today in the Black Museum. A car was found, abandoned in a ditch outside Raleigh.
You can see for yourself, Colonel Fentress, on the running board.
A dark stain there. It's blood?
Yes, it's blood. And see this?
A spent cartridge case.
It was found on the floor of the car.
Then my car was concerned in that poor fellow's murder?
We'll make confirmatory tests, of course. The blood stain will be checked against the constable's grouping, and the cartridge case will go to ballistics.
These routine checks must be carried out. But Colonel Fentress knew, and Inspector Clancy knew, that the driver of the stolen car had taken part in the policeman's murder. And knowing this, the inspector was able to reconstruct the crime.
We don't know why Constable Hacker pulled the car up, Sergeant. He was cycling home. Perhaps the Evans car was speeding. Well, whatever the reason, he called on it to halt. And in the process of questioning, he came to realize the car was stolen.
He'd have brought out his notebook and pencil to take down some particulars, sir.
And for doing that, he was killed.
The picture of the crime was clear, but now, how to find the driver of the car? Nothing was known about him. There were no eyewitnesses. One man had seen the driver, and he was dead. Where would they begin searching?
We'll begin right here at the car, Sergeant.
It's funny about those tires, sir.
Very funny. But not only the tires are missing.
No, the toolkit's been taken, and the jack, and most of the spare parts.
The windscreen wiper's been removed, so have the headlamps and a car radio Colonel Fentress had installed.
Vandalism, sir?
Well, if it was vandalism, it was well planned, Sergeant.
Yeah.
Now, there are lorry tracks over there. The stuff was loaded on and driven away.
Car stealing, sir, for spare parts and tires.
A very profitable pastime. Now, what was taken out of this car would probably be worth £200-300 on the second-hand market.
Black market, sir, for the tires.
I wonder who handles second-hand parts and tires around this district. Come on.
Where to, Inspector?
The nearest garage.
They found a garage less than half a mile away. The proprietor, reassured that he was not under suspicion, proved to be helpful.
Spare parts and tires. Quite a few places round here who handles them, Inspector.
Could you list them for us, sir?
Certainly. Come into the office.
There were 6 names on that list. 6 visits to make. Sergeant Redding made them, posing as a driver in search of new tires.
Oh, good morning. I need 4 new tires for an Evans car. Can you help me out?
Williams and Sons was sorry. They hadn't had any tires to sell for months past. Field and Company said the same thing. So did Hammond and Barton, Kennedy and Sons. Then Sergeant Redding paid his last visit. The 6th name on the list. A small motor workshop on the road out of Eastwood. A car was being overhauled by a mechanic. A lorry stood on a vacant block of land beside the workshop. A sign at the front of the building said, Randolph and Burns, motor engineers and spare parts.
Yes, sir?
I need 4 new tires for an Evans car. Can you help me out?
An Evans? Do you own an Evans car?
Oh, not me, chum, no. That's for the governor. I've been everywhere trying to get these tires.
Well, I might be able to set you up. Of course, they're in short supply.
We'll pay whatever you ask for them.
Okay. Ted,
Oh, Jack.
here a minute, will you?
What is it?
Fella here wants to buy some Evans tires.
Oh?
Chauffeur, aren't you, mate?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you can set him up, can't we?
No, we can't.
But Ted, he'll pay the right
I
price.
tell you, we can't. We can't set him. How can we when we haven't seen an Evans tire in months?
But Ted...
People just don't bring us second-hand tires anymore, mister. Sorry.
The sergeant went back to where Inspector Clancy was waiting for his report. Something he'd seen deep in the eyes of the man called Ted told him the search was at an end.
I don't know what spoiled it, Inspector. Perhaps he recognized me.
Perhaps he was just being cautious. You say the other man was ready to sell you the tires?
Ready and willing, sir. I think they're the ones we want. I'm almost sure of it.
All right, we'll make some further inquiries about them both. Now, first of all, their business registration. We'll get their full names from that.
The Business Records Office holds many secrets. The directors of England's leading companies, the balance of power and mighty industrial concerns. It also lists the many thousands of small businesses, companies, partnerships, sole traders, their trade and management personnel.
Here we are, Sergeant. Randolph and Burns, motor engineers, Eastwood.
Partners Edward Burns
Well, that'll be your friend Ted.
and Harold Randolph. Probably the other man I spoke to.
Well, take a note of their names. We'll see if the method index section knows them.
The Method Index section at Scotland Yard. That's a vast room of records. The walls are lined solidly with filing cabinets. Here are the details of all the crimes, from murder to petty theft. Here are the names and the aliases of all the criminals ever convicted in any English court. Filed and cross-filed for easy checking.
Those 2 men you asked me to check, Inspector Clancy.
Find anything on them, Severs?
There's no record for Harold Randolph.
What about the other one?
Burns, yes, we know him. Ted Burns, motor mechanic, 4 convictions. The first from my hometown, funnily enough, Oxford City Police Court.
The charge?
Stealing a motor car.
And what were the other 3 charges, Severs?
All connected with motor theft, sir. One was for removing spare parts from parked vehicles. Another time he was convicted for selling a stolen car.
That's all I want.
Very
Thank
good,
you,
sir.
Severs.
Inspector Clancy and Sergeant Redding drove back to Eastwood. On the road there, about 50 yards from the motor workshop, they waited. They saw 2 mechanics leave at 5:30 on their way home. Then, a few minutes later...
There he is, Inspector. That's Harry Randolph.
And he's alone.
It was a very peaceful scene. The casual passerby would have noticed a dark sedan slowing down beside a thick-set man in overalls.
Mr. Randolph?
Yeah? Oh, it's you. Still after them tires, eh?
In a manner of speaking, sir. This is Inspector Clancy from Scotland Yard.
Scotland Yard?
Get in, Mr. Randolph.
No, not me, Inspector. Now, you've got nothing against me.
On the contrary, we have a great deal against you. Get in.
Randolph was defiant at first, but when the advantages of turning King's evidence were pointed out to him, he became almost verbose.
It wasn't me who thought of the scheme. I was talked into it by him.
The scheme being to steal cars, sell their spare parts and tires, and abandon them?
Yeah. Ted said we couldn't get enough parts and tires to stay in business otherwise. He talked me into helping him to pinch the Evans.
Well, go on.
Well, everything was sweet, and then on the way back to Eastwood, the cop signals us to stop. Tells us we were speeding. He'd have got our names and all.
So you shot him, dead?
I didn't do it. Ted shot him. The gun's hidden in the desk down at our works. His fingerprints will be on it. I told him not to shoot. He wouldn't listen. We took the lorry down and got everything we could from the car and brought it back.
And where is that stuff now?
Well, some of it we sold, and 3 of the tires went off late today. I would have sold a lot to the copper here, but Ted was wise to him. He can smell coppers.
3 were sold. Then 1 tire is left on the premises?
Yeah. But listen, won't you? I might have helped to pinch the car, but I'd nothing to do with the murder. Ted did that. He shot the copper.
A report on the tire we found on the premises, sir. It comes from an Evans car, all right, and matches the tracks near Constable Hacker's body.
Then our case is complete, Sergeant. The gun was found, the fingerprints on the wheel rims belong to Randolph and Burns, and now the tire. All right, Randolph, you've one more chance to help us. Where's Burns? Come on, you must have some idea.
Right. But you got to look after me.
I'm not promising anything. Where's Burns?
He's trying to get away overseas. I think he was heading for Liverpool. He was always talking about a pal of his who was a ship's mate.
Can you remember the name of the ship?
I think it was called the Briar Rose.
I have reason to believe your name is Ted Burns.
Ted what? You got the wrong man, Sam.
I don't think so, Mr. Burns. I have here a warrant for your arrest on a charge of murder.
Hey, you got nothing on me? You got no evidence?
Oh, yes, we have, Mr. Burns. All the evidence we need.
And today, that tire occupies a place in the Black Museum.
Orson Welles will be back with you in just a moment.
The murder of Constable Hacker on the lonely Eastwood Road was solved by the patient methods of Scotland Yard and by the talking of Harry Randolph, whose verbosity put him behind bars for many years to come and brought his unholy friend Ted Burns to the last walk, the end of a rope, one morning at 8 o'clock. A crook's plan misfired into murder. And neither Burns nor Randolph had the talent for outwitting the men of the yard. So it was that another chapter of murder was closed. Another record added to the method index section. And another exhibit, the car tire, was added to the Black Museum. And now until we meet next time in the same place and I tell you another story about the Black Museum, I remain as always obediently yours. This is Orson Welles, speaking from London. The Black Museum, a repository of death. Yes, here in the grim stone structure on the Thames, which houses Scotland Yard, is a warehouse of homicide, where everyday objects, a man's necktie, a woman's glove, a boy's school cap, all are touched by murder. Now here's a champagne glass. That's a familiar object, long stem, delicate curve, shining crystal. This fragile object belongs to New Year's Eve, to weddings and to anniversaries.
Funny about things like this, Sergeant?
Funny, sir? I'd say that one was loaded.
I meant funny in a philosophical sense, Sergeant. Funny how human beings can take an article meant for happiness and use it for tragedy.
Well, anyway, that champagne glass can be found today in the Black Museum.
From the annals of the Criminal Investigation Department of the London Police, we bring you the dramatic stories of the crimes recorded by the objects in Scotland Yard's Gallery of Death, the Black Museum.
Well, here we are, in the Black Museum. Scotland Yard's Museum of Murder. This place echoes with violent death. Voices are hollow here, whether the hollowness is caused by the high-vaulted ceilings or by the reaction of the human mind to the atmosphere of this room. The effect is the same. Everybody who comes here learns a sense of fear. It's natural, because here lies death. Death, cruel, unnecessary, vengeful, or greedy. Still the kind of death brought by one man or one woman on another. This is a record to be studied not merely by criminologists, but by every student of man's inhumanity to man. Here's an iron skillet. It's heavy in your hand, the kind of kitchen utensil your grandmother used. Well balanced, quite suitable for frying eggs or veal chops, or for bashing a skull, perhaps. There's little doubt as to the use which brought this particular skillet here. Yes? And here's the champagne glass. It's well designed, graceful. You could place it with a companion on a silver tray, as Colonel Harry Reid did. You could pop a cork and then fill the glasses, as Colonel Harry Reid did. And you might say, as the dapper colonel did,
To you, my dear Elizabeth, to your return and your complete recovery.
I wish I could drink to that wholeheartedly, Harry. Really, I do.
Well, why not, my dear? You've been released. You're...
That's it, exactly. I've been released. Not merely sent home from a hospital, so to speak. After all, the hospital I was in had bars in the windows.
Oh, I insist, my dear, that you touch glasses with me and drink at once. That's no way to talk.
But, Harry,
Ah, then no buts, Elizabeth. Many people have had nerve breakdowns, and the vast majority of them have recovered.
Very well, Harry, dear. But not to me, to you. The most patient of husbands in the world.
So they drank the champagne, and all was well. It was very pleasant, very relaxing, reassuring. But the world is always too much with us, and the colonel finally had to say,
Now, you rest until dinner, Elizabeth. I have a brief appointment. I won't be long.
and the colonel kissed his wife, and the colonel went off to his appointment.
It's 6 months now, Reed. One way or the other, the matter ought to be settled. I assure you, Davis, there's nothing to worry about. These things take time. There's been plenty of time. Look, Reed, if you don't want to complete the deal, return the £500. But it's not up to me. My client... Your client indicated willingness to dispose of the property. My client paid the deposit in good faith. We consider it a binder on the contract. We've waited 6 months. Your £500 is quite safe, Davis. You can reassure your client. And on my side, we'll go through with the deal as soon as everything is clear.
Well, I certainly hope so. My people want to take possession.
And they shall indeed, and soon. Meanwhile, there's no reason for misunderstanding between us, is there? After all, we live in the same small town. We see each other constantly. You know, John, I've often wondered why we don't see more of each other. Socially, that is.
Rather a changeable fellow, the colonel, isn't he? There were other changes ahead, more serious ones. They first came to somewhat public notice the night our colonel called Dr. Ashley to his home.
Ah, Dr. Ashley. Good of you to come so quickly.
You made it sound rather urgent, Colonel. Is it really serious?
Yes, I'm afraid, Doctor. Really afraid. It's my wife.
Has she broken down again?
No, she complains of terrible pain in her abdomen.
I'd better see her at once.
Yeah, this way, please. If you can, Doctor.
Yes?
She seems to me to be as much frightened as she is in pain.
Oh? What exactly do you mean by that?
Frightened that, that her pain is in her imagination.
I see. Oh, very well. I'll bear that in mind, Colonel.
Ah, in here.
If you'll wait outside, Colonel, please.
Oh, must I, Doctor?
I prefer it. Very well. Now then, Mrs. Reed. Can you hear me, Mrs. Reed?
The good colonel waited outside the door. Up and down, back and forth, he paced, almost as if he were once again on guard duty. Grim-faced, tense, he waited. At long last.
You'd better come in, Colonel. Quick.
Doctor, is she?
I'm afraid so. I've done everything I can.
A few moments later, Elizabeth Reed was at rest, at last. Tears streamed down the colonel's cheeks, but he was silent. There seemed nothing to say. The doctor led him away and told him gently,
It was acute gastritis and her heart. You'll want the minister, I assume, and the mortician. I'll send the certificate over. Natural causes.
There was a well-attended funeral. The flowers were piled high in tribute to the colonel's position in the town as well as to the memory of his wife. And then the colonel resumed his life, somewhat more lonely, but still active, bearing himself in military fashion as he went about his small real estate business, and time drifted by. 1 month, 2, and then one day on the main street.
Good morning, Colonel.
Ah, Davis, good to see you.
I've hesitated discussing this, your recent bereavement and so on, but don't you think we need to close our deal, Reed?
Oh, yes, yes, of course. That is, I'm rather by myself these days. Would you care to join me for tea or a bit something stronger one afternoon?
You say when, Reed. I'll be glad to.
Excellent. Then, shall we say tomorrow, 5-ish?
Why not? Your place or mine?
Well, mine, of course. Delighted to have you. Have a scone, old man. Really excellent. My housekeeper has quite the touch.
Thank you, I will.
Almost as if we were a pair of elderly ladies. Tea and scone.
Two gentlemen, somewhat past middle age, enjoying tea and scones and making ready to discuss business. In fact, they did discuss business. A £500 deposit and the pending deal. And John Davis went home quite satisfied. John Davis went home and a little later called Dr. Ashley.
I don't understand it, Doctor. My stomach's like cast iron. Always has been. Now, suddenly, this. None of us are quite as young as we used to be. Even cast iron can wear thin with use. Eat anything out of the ordinary, John? Today? Yesterday? No, nothing. Had some scones for tea. The butter may have been a bit rancid, but tasted perfectly fresh. Over at Colonel Reed's. Eh? Reed? Yes, that's why. We had a little business to discuss. He asked me over. Seems quite lonely since his wife passed on, so I went, mostly to keep him company. Oh, nice of you. Well, just take the prescription I'm leaving you. Rest a day or two. You'll be all right. What's wrong, Doctor? Oh, nothing. Just a quirk of memory. Oh? How so? Your symptoms and Mrs. Reed's rather the same. Nothing serious about it, just odd that we should have two similar cases in such close juxtaposition. A town like this, a doctor gets to know most of the illness.
As the doctor said, nothing serious. Just an interesting coincidence. And in a day or so, John Davis was up and about. Aside from a slight tenderness in his abdomen, he felt no after effects. All was well. All was quiet. Everyone was his courteous self, including Colonel Reed.
Well, now, candy. And from the Colonel. How decent of him. Here it is, Doctor. The same wrappings it came in.
Nice-looking box. Don't you care for candy, John? You haven't eaten much.
As a matter of fact, I don't. I did offer a piece to the charwoman at the office. You see, one's missing.
The charwoman, eh? Is that the way you treat a gift? With the hope you are sufficiently recovered to enjoy this, Harry Reid. Rather decent of him.
That's what I thought, until the charwoman was taken with pains and reaching an hour after she ate the candy.
Are you suggesting anything, John?
That would be slanderous at this stage, wouldn't it?
There's nothing to it, John. There couldn't be. The Colonel...
Well, I inquired at the probate office. He did rather well following his wife's death and her will, you know. He never had any money of his own to speak of. Former military men rarely do.
Yes, it might be interesting. I've done practically no laboratory work of my own for some time, but I have a little equipment. Shall I try my hand at a bit of chemical analysis, John? I'm curious about the contents of that box of candy. You seem to be as well as I.
The doctor was methodical, to say the least. He took his time setting up his equipment, preparing reagents, making ready for his private little tests. Meanwhile, John Davis ran into his friend the Colonel on the street.
John, good to see you. How are you, Harry? You're looking fit.
Well, I try to keep that way. Care to join me for another attack of indigestion, old man?
Well, today, the champagne glass we've been talking about can be seen, as you might expect, among the other exhibits in the Black Museum. The Colonel and John Davis parted quite amicably on the street. Davis watched the smart military walk the ramrod straight back as the Colonel paraded into his office under his head. Somehow it didn't seem quite plausible that this man might be something quite different than what he seemed. The next afternoon, the telephone rang in John Davis's office.
Yes?
Oh, that you, John? This is Harry here.
Harry? Oh, yes, of course. How are you?
Ah, very well. And you?
Quite well.
No more stomachache?
No trace.
Well, and how about this evening?
Oh, sorry, old man, I can't this evening. But perhaps in a day or so.
Oh, too bad. Oh, I'll be speaking to you. Goodbye.
Bye.
That evening, Davis had a previous appointment with Dr. Ashley in his makeshift laboratory.
This little operation here is the marsh test.
Oh?
For arsenic.
Interesting.
Yes, isn't it? Particularly since I found that every piece of candy in your gift box had arsenic in it.
Good Lord.
Arsenic, you see, is a cumulative poison. A person may have a tolerance for quite a large amount of it. But it usually fails to pass through the human system. It accumulates, and bit by bit, the fatal dose is built up until one day the victim dies. Dr. Ashley explained all this to John Davis. Finally, John grasped the significance of the facts.
Each piece of candy would never bother the ordinary stomach, or the cast iron type, such as you boasted you have. Most people could eat a piece or two, indeed. You'd eaten most of the candy yourself. Well, you follow me, I gather?
Follow you? Doctor, I'm a step ahead of you. But exactly what that step is, I'm not sure. I think we need expert help.
The local constabulary?
I said expert help.
Where from?
The CID, Scotland Yard.
It was a clear, cogent letter reciting the situation as Dr. Ashley and John Davis knew it. It was addressed to the Home Secretary, the gentleman in the British government responsible for the police force in general. In due course, the letter reached the desk of Inspector Charles in Scotland Yard. Following the set routine, Inspector Charles showed the communication to his immediate assistant, Detective Sergeant Hatch.
Well, nothing else for it. You and I will have to take a small trip to the country. Frankly, I won't mind. I can use a touch of country air after all.
They came into the quiet town unobtrusively. Two men on a walking tour, vacationists. They put up at the inn. Toward sundown, They strolled about the town, quite casually. They turned in at the gate with its little sign announcing that Dr. Ashley had his dispensary there. Once, however, within the doctor's office.
Now then, Doctor, perhaps you'd let Sergeant Hatch and I have it from the beginning.
Well, my entrance into the situation came shortly after Mrs. Reed returned from the sanitarium.
She'd been ill?
Mentally ill.
Nervous breakdown?
Rather more than that. She'd been certified insane. She was discharged as being quite stable once again.
And you were called in?
In my professional capacity. I found her past help. Acute gastritis, or so it seemed at the time.
But it doesn't seem so now?
You understand, Inspector, I have no facts. At least not on that side. I merely analyzed the box of candy received by John Davis shortly after he'd been taken ill.
Doctor, would this Colonel Reed benefit from Mr. Davis's death?
There'd been something about a real estate and a deposit paid. Quite a large sum, I believe. Mr. Davis can give you the details.
One final question, sir. Who had Mrs. Reed committed to the institution in the first instance?
Why, I believe the husband did. But the records will be available to you, of course.
Of course. Well, thank you, Doctor. If we need you...
By the time they left the doctor's office, Inspector Charles and Sergeant Hatch felt they had heard an interesting, if circumstantial, story. Their next stop, naturally, was John Davis's home.
You've no idea, gentlemen, what a relief it is to have police officers of your caliber on the job.
Thank you. About the candy and the card in the box, do you have any definite reason to believe the Colonel wants you, well, out of the way?
There's the matter of £500 he either will not or cannot explain.
And, Dr. Ashley mentioned Mrs. Reed's will.
Yes, curious about that. There was one will made out entirely in favor of her children by her first marriage. The will which was accepted and executed was in the Colonel's handwriting, but signed by Mrs. Reed, and produced subsequent to her death.
You find that interesting, I take it, Sergeant?
I expect you do as well, sir.
Quite. Mr. Davis, do you think it might be possible to exhume Mrs. Reed's body without the matter becoming common knowledge in the whole town?
The men from Scotland Yard accomplished the almost impossible. Armed with the proper papers, plus tools and dark lanterns, they supervised the removal of the body at night, with no one the wiser except the necessary officials. This feat completed, they waited quite patiently. The government analyst was called in. The report was brief. Inspector Charles read it to Dr. Ashley.
Examination reveals the presence of 4 grains of arsenic, more than a fatal dose, and the largest amount of the poison I have ever found in human remains. Well, that's it, Doctor.
And I didn't recognize the symptoms. Acute gastritis, I called it.
Why should you have recognized them, sir? I dare say murder of any kind is hardly a common occurrence in your practice. Well, Sergeant, since our warrant is all in order, it begins to appear that a search of Colonel Reed's premises may be next on the agenda.
Now the pretense of the walking tour was completely discarded. It was Saturday, and the sleepy little village was just about bestirring itself. The inspector and the sergeant walked a short distance from the inn to Colonel Reed's place of business, almost directly opposite Davis's office. The sergeant tried the door.
Not locked, sir.
A locked door in these parts would arouse more suspicion than not. Let's go in, shall we?
One file cabinet, one desk, telephone, chair for visitors. Can't do much of a business.
I dare say not. Let's get to it.
The search was quite thorough. The desk was emptied of its contents. These were replaced in an orderly fashion.
Oh, nothing extraordinary here, sir. Oh? What do you make of this, sir?
Champagne glass. Rear of the file cabinet. It's odd.
Shall I hold it aside, sir?
Yes, you may as well. Interesting, the trace of sediment. Apparently, it was never washed after it was used the last time. Anything else in there, Sergeant?
Oh, what's going on in here?
Colonel Reed?
Yes. More to the point, for you to identify yourselves and your business here, if any.
Inspector Charles, CID. My identity card. This is Sergeant Hatch.
I see. I assume you have a warrant for this search.
We do. Right here, Colonel.
Very well. Go on with your work.
May I ask why you were keeping the champagne glass in the file cabinet?
A memento to my poor wife. We drank from it. That is, she did about a week before she passed away.
A nice gesture, if I may say so. And still with a trace of the sediment at the bottom. Careful, sir. It'd be a pity to have the glass break after all this time.
Oh, sorry. Awkward of me to brush against it like that.
Yes, wasn't it? All right, Sergeant, you can open the desk drawer the Colonel just closed and see what he put in it.
But you said you'd finish.
Your pardon, Colonel.
I've had quite enough of this.
These paper packets weren't in here a few minutes ago, Inspector.
How many?
Look here, I wouldn't have
20 of them, sir.
I'll take one. Thank you. White powder.
Well?
This wouldn't be arsenic, would it, Colonel?
It not only would be, it is.
Really?
Well, as you can see, I'm wearing my gardening coat. Ordinarily, I do not come into the office on Saturday, but something came up. I've been planning an experiment in my garden, hence the arsenic.
A gardening experiment? With 20 packets of arsenic?
Yes. My lawn is plagued with dandelions, roughly 24 of them. I plan to drill a small hole at the root of each weed, pour in the arsenic in each of those packets, and kill each dandelion individually, rather than take the chance of ruining the whole lawn.
Sorry, Colonel, it's a good story, but rather far-fetched. Particularly since you tried to rid yourself of the packets before we searched your person. And particularly since the charge pending is willful murder of your wife by arsenical poisoning.
But this is ridiculous. Someone is... Sergeant!
Keep that champagne glass safe before Colonel Reed succeeds in smashing it.
Yes, sir.
Colonel Reed, you are under arrest. The charge is murder. I must warn you that anything you may say...
I will not stand. Oh, no, Sergeant! I'll be acquitted. You'll see, and then I'll have to leave here. A trial?
That'll be quite enough, Colonel. You've made several mistakes, not the least of which was your attempt on John Davis, and your preservation of this glass. A sentimental gesture, but rather silly. My bet is the sediment in it will turn out to be arsenic. You must have been very sure of yourself, Colonel, to leave this glass unwashed. Very sure of yourself indeed. Bring him along, Sergeant. I think he'll come quietly now.
And today, that champagne glass can be seen in the Black Museum.
Orson Welles will be back with you in just a moment.
There was no doubt about one facet of Colonel Reed's character. He was a man of great pride. His behavior at the trial was exemplary. His bearing, military. He repeated his story of the separate packets of arsenic for separate dandelions, and he sounded as if he'd made a good case of it. At least for himself. But not, as it turned out, for the jury. Colonel Reed accepted his sentence as if it were an order from a superior officer. And one morning, at the traditional time of 8 o'clock, Colonel Reed marched to the scaffold as if he were on parade. And as for the champagne glass, well, it remains in its customary place, as I told you, in Scotland Yard. Now, until we meet next time, in the same place, and I tell you another story about the Black Museum, I remain, as always, obediently yours.